Good afternoon, everybody. I think this is the second to last session in this room, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that break is the seventh inning stretch, sort of, for us. I'm glad you all are joining us this afternoon. I know it's a very boring topic, not much going on in this space these days, but Michael is kind enough to join us for a quick conversation. Do we need to check Twitter before we start, see if there's any new?
Yeah, I don't know. As of an
someone
hour ago,
check for
I
us?
know what's going on.
Because this may be outdated very, very soon. No, but let's kind of talk about the elephant in the room per se. Lots of news about Sinclair, Diamond Sports Group, things like the B word from a financial perspective. Look, I'll turn it over to you and just what can you tell us about what's going on? And maybe it's also a good opportunity to use that as a way to kind of explain Bally Sports Plus versus the traditional linear RSN system.
There's something going on? No, I mean, look, like, obviously, I'm reading a lot kind of as we all are in here. Look, nothing's been filed yet. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about bankruptcy. I think, personally, what has drawn me to this opportunity is, no matter kind of what happens in the future, and I think you've seen some dominoes already start to fall. Look, the industry does need to reinvent itself in the regional sports network world, right? I think if you look at how the economics are, if you look at how the business runs right now, we're in a new world, right? And I think that we have an opportunity. Are we at the kind of inflection point for direct-to-consumer? No. I think we're at the beginning, but there's no doubt that no matter what comes next, we've got to completely rethink this business model. And look, I think we're really well positioned to be able to do that. So, who knows what the future exactly is going to bring? But I also think there are a lot of really exciting possibilities about it. And should bankruptcy happen, it's not I think as dire and doom and gloom as everyone's making it out to be.
Fair enough. You mentioned, kind of potentially a new model, the beginning of maybe a transition towards streaming. Can we maybe wind back to the launch of Bally Sports Plus? Can you kind of talk us through some of the planning, the development of it, sort of what was, in your mind, the value proposition, and then, sort of how do you think it's borne out thus far?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that has drawn myself, the team, to this opportunity is, look, I think these rights are still incredibly valuable. They just need to be positioned and marketed and distributed in a very different way, right? And I think that the direct-to-consumer model gives us the opportunity to do that. Like, I think back to kind of when I was at Hulu, when I was at PlayStation. I mean, regional sports networks drove a lot of engagement. They drove a lot of signups. And again, I just think we're in a new world where these have to be thought of, and the whole experience has to be thought of in a completely different way. So when we look at the launch, I think, one, we can get into it in a little bit. It's been really successful, right? And we can go into some of the kind of a bunch of the engagement and stuff that we've seen. But really the first few months to us has just been, how can we understand customer behavior better? How can we understand sign-up behavior better? We're really taking a streaming playbook as we look at this, right? Like, this is about how do we look at all of our performance marketing? How do we look at our sign-up flows? How do we really understand research and data better than anyone across the sports world to understand how this works? And I think that that's going to help us be very successful and build a product and build a proposition moving forward. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in sports betting and e-commerce and all this other stuff and all these other buzzwords out there. But there's just, these rights are valuable, and it's kind of like, how can we get these two fans in a more easily understandable and quick way and give them another option to watch games? And I'd say that we're learning a lot, but we're really pleased with what we've seen so far.
Yeah, is there anything you can share about some of those engagement metrics or how your consumers are using the product?
Yeah, I think one of the best things, and I tried to give sign-up numbers today. I wasn't allowed to, but what I'd say is, like, a lot of us are excited about the sign-up numbers. I think, though, who knows given the environment. But from an engagement perspective, what we've been seeing, I think it's really, in a lot of cases, engagement's really hard, right? People come in, they sign up, they try out, and they leave. And I think what we've seen, we look at sessions per unique, we look at minutes per unique, and we look at kind of where everyone's coming from. And look, sessions per unique per week are almost at 3, right? From an engagement perspective, the amount of hours, we're seeing 30 to 40% of our users spending a few hours a week. And so what that at least means is that For those that are starting to come into the app and use this, they're using it a lot. They're not just trying it out. They're not just kind of checking out one game and then leaving. They're really using it, and they're finding a lot of value in it, which I think is really exciting to see. Obviously, the next step is how do you get a larger volume of people into the top of the funnel. I still think there's a lot of confusion between authentication, between streaming, between where to go, right? Obviously, I think the regional sports network model of zip codes and actual location, it's confusing, right? And so I think we need to break through some of that messaging. But again, I look at this as day one, right? No one's figured this out yet, and I think given our portfolio, given our scale, given some of the great markets that we're in, we've got an opportunity to figure this out before anyone.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a good point or a good question that I had is, what is the customer experience in different markets? Because you're talking about the top of the funnel. It's actually 19 different funnels, as it were, right? And so if I'm a Bally Sports Plus customer and I originally signed up in Florida, how does that differ from someone who's out in California or Arizona or Texas?
Yeah, I mean, right now, sort of version 1 is you're signing up essentially directly for a version of the live feed, right? And I think our products and engineering team have made a really slick, clean experience that is, that looks and feels, those who stream, I think it's going to be a very comfortable, easy to use experience for them. But look, it's version 1, right? I think the real opportunity is over time, how can we work with our individual team partners, work with our leagues, work with the athletes who are part of our teams, and really start building a localized experience. You asked about a differentiator beforehand. Differentiator is being local, right? There's not a true local sports service out there, and we can do it because we have those rights. And so I think as we look at content, as we look at other pieces of the experience, that's when it can really start to differentiate. And that's where it starts getting exciting.
You talked about this being version 1. As you're looking to develop version 1.1 or version 2, are there things you see in other services, sports streaming specific or otherwise, in the marketplace that you like from a functionality or feature perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think YouTube and YouTube TV have done a really good job of creating an experience where there's just a lot of content related to either that individual game or that individual team. And I think if you're a fan of the Mavericks or if you're a fan of the Heat, right, how do we start building this place that you start to repeatedly come back to because that there's going to be stuff about your team there, right? Like I know what YouTube's built around the NFL and some other sports has been really good, I think on the whole. So I think it's building that immersive experience. It's building that experience where, again, it's got to be repeatable, right? Even if it's all well and good that we have an opportunity to get you to the live game, but how do we further increase those sessions per unique, and how do we get you coming back when it's off season? And that's the really hard part, I think, about developing a service like this, but it's a good challenge to have.
You mentioned YouTube TV, and that's like a virtual cable box. Just curious, there isn't a true comp to your service because you are the local service in the majority of our markets. What are the services that you may benchmark yourselves against? Is it the ESPN Pluses, Paramount Pluses, or is it something completely different?
It's a great question. We kind of debate it internally as well. I think you look at an ESPN Plus on one hand, right? They've got live events, but they also they have a lot of stuff, right? And it's, I think, a little difficult. I mean, look, it's a great product for certain verticals, but I think it's a bit of a difficult one to navigate because there's so much there, right? And then, I think you look at a DAZN, which is also live events, but they don't have things that I think are specific to certain teams. So I don't think there's anything quite that exists like us. But again, when it comes to branding and marketing and bringing in subscribers, I think we have to go back to what the HBO Max is, what the Disney Plus is, what a lot of these streamers are doing, because it's the same math, right? It's how do you build enough awareness around something? And I think that we have it actually, easy is not the right word, but we can be so targeted locally, right? If we have a message or something that's really appealing to that certain fan base, we've got a bigger shot. And I think one thing that we've started doing that I think can be really beneficial over the long term is a lot of our team partners are really interested in this too, right? I think for some team partners, they're like, what is streaming, right? And there's other team partners that really see the value, right? And are super into their fan base and where they can grow their fan base. And I think there's a lot of partnership opportunities with our teams that can be a real differentiator for us too.
Yeah, I mean, that was a question I was going to ask. We were asking about sort of market feedback. The market isn't just the consumers that may sign up for the service, but it's also your partners in the local market teams. And so curious, you touched upon it already a little bit, kind of sort of what has their feedback and reception been, and what is their level of involvement as it relates to the Plus service relative to what they already may be doing when it comes to the linear RSN?
Yeah, it really comes down to education, because I think, look, it's really exciting to talk about the future of RSNs, but look, we know what our main revenue stream still is, and I think the teams look at what their main revenue stream still is, and so it's really important to position this to them as a complement or an alternative, right, for a younger fan base who might not subscribe to cable. And so I think a lot of education on what we are, who we're trying to reach, how we can partner with them. Something that they're all really interested in is just the user data that we're able to really bring. And the more that we can share with them on that point and bring them real-time insights, it's a really constructive conversation. There's the Cavs, for example, have been a really, really terrific partner. There's been a lot of sharing of kind of what we're seeing. We've been working with them on some alternate feeds. And they've really helped plus up some marketing on their end in the Cleveland area. And if you look at where the Cavs rank kind of across all of our NBA teams, they're one of the top teams. And so I think, and all teams obviously talk. And so I think the more that we're in with each of these and sharing data and sharing findings and understanding kind of who each of our prospects are, the better off we'll be. Another example with the Pacers, for example. We worked on an offer with them for season ticket holders where if you signed up for a certain package, you get a subscription of Bally Sports Plus, right? And so I think as we look to next season, as we look to some of our baseball teams, I think that's a really good model to drive awareness and bring the right people in.
Makes a lot of sense. Over the last month or two, the main word associated with this whole topic has, you said it, bankruptcy. But I think prior to that, the other word that was often kind of brought up is price. Right? And so whether you internally choose to view an ESPN Plus, HBO Max, Paramount Plus as a benchmark competitive offering, in some respects the market is choosing to do so. And so wanted to spend a minute talking about the rationale behind the price point you went out with in the marketplace and the decision making around that.
Yeah, look, I'd say a couple things on price. One, we're doing quarterly pricing research, right? I think consumer perception on pricing of these sorts of products continues to change, right? I think it was one thing right after kind of the peak of COVID. It's something different now, and I think it's really important for us to understand what fans want. I also think if I look back at some of the mistakes that perhaps we made in streaming a few years ago, I think we were priced too low, right? You can always go up. You can always go down. It's really hard to go up. And I think coming out with frankly, maybe a more expensive price point allows us to see a few things and learn a lot. And there's always kind of flexibility, and that's kind of what I'd say on the topic. Look, I think when you look at what MSG came out with, you look at what Nesson came out with, I think there's core fans that would spend a lot. I'm a diehard Rangers fan. I would pay for every game through MSG and not think twice about it. But I also don't think we're in the minority, or I think we're in the minority, right? And so there's got to be some balance. I also think that as we grow, are there bundles? Are there certain partnerships we can do where we can get this into the hands maybe a little more efficiently and a little lower priced, and that's something that we have to look at, right? Like, our general feeling is the more people that have this, whether even if it's through authentication or through streaming, the better. But it's a huge topic and something we're constantly looking at.
Is there the prospect that in addition or beyond the Major League Baseball, NHL, and NBA rights that kind of power Bally Sports Plus, that to maybe not go to the extreme end of having everything, try to have everything like an ESPN Plus does, do you have plans to kind of supplement with some other sports rights that may be farther along the chute in terms of the long tail, just to have more live programming hours?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, again, there are plenty of markets where we're only in a few months out of the year, and that it's a little hard, I think, to manage a streaming business when for 6 months you don't have certain programming. So I think that's number one. And flipping on that, again, our differentiator is being local. And the way I look at it, again, if you're a fan of this team, what else can we bring on, right? That makes sense. I think it's really hard to find content that drives scale, right? Other than the live rights right now. I certainly think that, and we've done kind of a lot from a hiring and a strategy perspective in the content side of things. There are going to be 2 or 3 markets that we're going to look at to see how we can really blow out from a year-round programming perspective and see if that works. But I really do believe in looking at that. And I look at a Barstool, for example, right? We can debate on how they've actually monetized their content and whether they've been successful at it. But they're, for a younger audience, a must-viewed platform, right? Because they have content that really goes year-round. And so, is there a hyper-local version of that makes sense in some of our bigger markets that keeps fans engaged and, makes that price point sensible for them year-round, even if we're not carrying a live game? And then from a rights perspective, yeah, look, there are things that are out there. I'd say that we need to get past, this next period of time before we look at more rights. But certainly, I think it's definitely on the horizon.
I've got a couple more questions, but I do want to remind you guys that you can pose your own questions, and we'll pull them up in a few minutes, and I will even let Michael pick the first one to answer. So definitely invest some time in submitting a question. We'll make sure to get to it. You talked about how in some markets you have maybe multiple sets of rights, and there's some where you only have a single sport or a single team. So that seems to suggest that across the footprint, it's not kind of a monolith in terms of the offering. Putting aside the number of teams in a given market that you have the streaming rights to, are there any other characteristics that you've seen in your data about which markets are more successful on the plus side than others, however you want to define it? Kind of can use this as an opportunity to talk about some things that teams are doing very well in terms of leaning in versus those that may be just on the sidelines watching.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a mix of several different things. One, you do feel the effect if a team is good or not, right? There are a couple markets where the team can be terrible and just the fans are so diehard that they watch all the time. But for the most part, right, if a team isn't great, you kind of see that slope. I think number 2, yeah, we talked about it before. If a team is willing to invest in marketing and invest in really partnering with us, we see really opportunities there. I think 3, it's been really interesting. Since the trading deadline, there's some teams that have made some really good additions, and there's a lot of interest in it. So I think that's number 3. And then look, number 4, it's been interesting, right? I wouldn't necessarily say that the markets where we have full teams, we've seen greater engagement. But I think there's some markets that are bigger college markets that have a larger population of younger people and younger consumers, and that's where we've really seen, I think, a pop from at least a direct to consumer perspective. And then the last thing I'd add is, one of the interesting things that we've seen is just high school sports of all things in some markets have done incredibly well. And so as we some of our biggest sign up days have been around high school sports, and as we look at that, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to be a home in some places for that. So it's kind of a mix of all those different things, which is super interesting.
Very cool. This is the last one for me, so if the folks on the side wouldn't mind teeing up the questions in a sec. There's kind of a donut and donut hole situation when it comes to local market rights, right? You guys control the center of the circle in terms of the local market streaming option, but leagues in many ways have their direct-to-consumer offerings that are out of market, various shapes and forms. Do you feel like at some point those things are going to come to a head? Because from the consumer perspective, depending on where they are or how they access the content, they may have to sign up for multiple services. Do you have any thoughts about kind of the convergence of the donut and the donut hole?
I have thoughts. I don't know if anyone wants to hear them. No, I think in an ideal world, there would be a platform, right, where fans could go to for their games without blackouts. But I think as this whole situation has really shown, it's a really hard place to get to. Look, I'm a big soccer fan, right? And people use this example all the time, but I've got to go to Peacock on the weekend, right? I've got to go to Paramount Plus for Champions League weeks. I've got to go to ESPN Plus, right, for FA Cup. And so that's just one example, but that's confusing. I mean, if you're a fan of one of our teams, right, let's use the Dallas Stars. I can catch most of my local games on if I sign up for Bally Sports Plus, right? But ESPN Plus has some games. Turner has some games. If I'm out of market, right, I guess I can get mostly everything through ESPN Plus. But my hope is that through all of this, we can kind of work towards a more consolidated, even if it's a bundle, right? Like I think everyone's talking about let's do what's best for the consumer. Let's do let's actually get together and figure that out, because it's not that way now. And I think we've got an opportunity through all of these changes right now to be able to do that. And that's my hope.
You heard it here first. Maybe a Bally's and League D2C bundle coming to a market near you.
Let's do it.
You mentioned Dallas. To put it in context for the traditional sports pro audience, right? Like you have cities in the United States that are the size of population-wise of European countries, right? And so that's why local markets became a thing, and those rights kind of make sense in this market and really don't exist anywhere else, as I think Nick and Chris said right at the outset. But I did promise you can pick the first question, so.
These are all really good questions that don't have to do with bankruptcy, which is great. How do you balance the desire to achieve DTC growth with your existing linear affiliate agreements? Is there a tipping point where DTC becomes a priority? Yeah, I mean that's something that we definitely look like. As I said before, I mean the bulk of our revenue still comes from MVPD agreements, and I think even in our most bullish direct to consumer business cases, it's going to take a couple years, right? And I think that's an awareness issue. That is a tech issue. And I think we're doing a great job of getting there. But again, I think you get past this by making it clear that, hey, if you don't have cable, right, if you're a younger fan, this is an option for you, right? Like the way if I look at it, we just did a deal with Fubo a couple months ago. I think that's great, right? If you can authenticate and use the app, cool. If you want to sign up directly, cool. So I think it's how do we get more people to just get into streaming, right? Because I think ultimately down the line, yeah, you'll just want to probably sign up direct to consumer. That's where it's heading. But I think it would be really foolish of us to just think that that's all we should focus on right now.
I guess we'll go with the one that's right at the top of the chute. Is Diamond's in Diamond's financial position, does acquiring more RSNs make any sense? Maybe not your decision, but
yeah, no. I mean, I think that we've got kind of bigger fish to fry right now. But look, I would say longer term, I wish that there was, I wish there was one platform that kind of had all of our, every single local right out there. And I know that we're really excited about the product that we've built and the team that we have, and kind of all the how progressive we think we are in terms of what we're building. And so we're willing to talk to anyone who's looking to get into the DTC space on how we think this should be done.
Yeah. With the spin up of a D2C service, there's an additional place where the game and the stream can be found. And so the question around combating illegal streaming, has that become a greater focus now that there's not only the linear but the D2C option?
Yeah, it's also a really good question. I mean, it's really hard, I'd say, to stream this illegally more than other apps, just because of you already have to be in a certain location to receive this stream. So kind of a lot of the authentication that we have makes it quite difficult. But it's definitely something that is a top priority for us too.
To that point, do you find, are there consumers that hop markets? Not because they're literally driving somewhere just to see a game, but people are traveling. A lot of people came from out of town to New York City. Do you see in the user behavior that there are people that may have originated in one market that are actually consuming it in some other market?
Yeah, there's some. I mean, you can sign up, for example, in New York, and for 30 days, right, you could get access to this market. So there's ways around it. Like we'll find people who are associated with different teams, kind of do that. But for the most part, I think everyone's just figuring it out.
We'll go with the one at the top. Bally Sports products are based on the engagement of locals with their representative teams. Have you ever considered the same model with individual athletes?
I mean, what I would say to that is, I think athletes need to be a big part of what we do. I believe in athlete marketing. I believe in influencer marketing. I also think that if you look at celebrities, if you look at people in life, like kind of across the world, everyone's a fan of the team, the city they grew up in, and I think there's a huge opportunity from a differentiation and a brand perspective to tap into that, right? Like, it sounds corny, but everyone's a fan of their hometown team. So I think that's got to be a part of what we do moving forward.
Awesome. And we will get to all three of these questions. I think we have enough time for that. The one we'll tackle the pricing one. Would you ever price Bally Sports Plus to take more customers from cable? Is that journey you'd ever like? Is that journey you'd ever like to take customers on, or will you adapt to wider shift?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, right now, right, we'd like to, and we plan on with Spectrum, for example, to sit down with them and see how we can market this together, right? A bunch of our renewals are coming up, and look, like, all our major MVPD partners have great scale. And I think in a perfect world, we'd sit down with them and just be like, look, how do we sell this together? Whether it's with wireless or, Comcast is also in the RSN business, Spectrum also in the RSN business. We don't compete with anyone. So I think when you look at kind of those variables, there's a lot of things we can do to work together versus coming out with some message about taking consumers. Like, I definitely don't think that's the direction that we want to go to at all. And I think we all have to realize that in a few years, we all know kind of where this is heading. Yep. But it would be a huge goal of ours to work more closely with our traditional distribution partners, because I think there's a ton of opportunity there.
You didn't mention it in particular in terms of products or features you were looking at, but ClipperVision and Second Spectrum and what they're doing is obviously very, very interesting. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's great. And look, like, Clippers are one of our teams, right? And so we've worked with them on kind of how to set this thing up. And our product teams have been working really closely together. And look, for them too, and Ballmer said it, it's version 1, right? I mean, I think they just wanted to plant a flag, and I admire that they did that. I think it's really interesting. They've got some great alternate feeds. In terms of inspiration, yeah, like, it's something that we definitely are interested in learning from, and there's a lot that we share with them too. So I hope that more teams try and do this moving forward, because it's definitely the model of the future. But again, I think it shows that we're really in the first innings of this.
Yeah, I think Ballmer's fervor for ClipperVision is only second to his fervor for facilities in his new stadium. Last question. So a long-term hypothetical. Which challenger sport would you take into the RSN model? Lacrosse, fighting, women's flag football, pickleball, and I'll throw in also, there's been some forays into it from a soccer perspective as well. So I'll throw that as a number 5.
Yeah, and I wouldn't take this as, again, we're not exactly in the position right now to be, we're definitely thinking about what comes next, but I don't want anyone to take this as though we're in deals. I think that all those are really interesting. I think one that I don't see there is, I think CBS and the deal the deal that was done with NWSL, I think is a really interesting one. I think that's a league that no one should sleep on. And certainly that's one I think that would be great on a local level. And women's sports in general, I think are, we have some WNBA rights, but that's an area that I think needs to be explored a lot more. I know there's a pickleball craze, and I think lacrosse is definitely having a moment too. There's been a lot of really great innovation there, but it's also hard. I think that there's a lot out there, but what can you bring in that will get people to continue to come back, and that's a tough one. So we'll see. Awesome. It's not the easiest space to be in.
Well, Michael, look, I appreciate you taking the time and to talk with us, and also thanks Sports Pro for having us for this session. We'll turn it back over to you guys.
Thanks, everyone.